This podcast introduces you to child custody jurisdiction. It raises similar issues to the family support issues we studied under the UIFSA. The stakes are a bit higher, though, because we're also talking about physically where the children are. So this links to a whole subject area outside the scope of this class focused on child kidnapping and abduction. The historic context is again important here. Forum shopping used to be the norm. Any jurisdiction with a substantial interest in the children or in the proceedings could exercise jurisdiction. So, if you had a bad custody outcome in Kentucky, you might just relocate to Indiana and seek a more favorable order. The idea, though, that Indiana might not honor an order issued in Kentucky is quite surprising in light of our Constitution's full faith and credit clause. So the UCCJA, the Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction Act, in 1968 sought to address these historic problems. It set out 4 bases for jurisdiction over child custody decisions. First, the child's home state, then whether a jurisdiction had a significant connection between the state and the parties, emergency jurisdiction when the child is present and the child's welfare is threatened, or a default jurisdiction when no one else has jurisdiction. Notably, though, the problem is that we're talking about a uniform act, not a federal law. So while it sought to fix the problems of these historical rules, it would only work if every state adopted it. The Uniform Act was published in 1968, and by the mid-1970s, only about half of the states had adopted it. And some had adopted it and changed it. So this undermined the whole idea of uniformity. Then enters the Parental Kidnapping Prevention Act, passed in 1980 by Congress to address these festering issues of jurisdictional inconsistency and uncertainty. The UCCJA had set out these 4 bases for jurisdiction. Note the bullet points, not numbers. The Parental Kidnapping Prevention Act, passed as federal law, went and numbered each of these 4 bases for jurisdiction to give them a rank order. This then became the law in all 50 states after 1980. It also established that the full faith and credit clause governs child custody orders. So if a family relocates from California to Tennessee, the child custody order from California would remain in effect in Tennessee. It also set out this concept of continuing exclusive jurisdiction. This should sound familiar from the UIFSA. I used the basketball pivot foot analogy last time. That works here as well. But let's also consider the imagery of a tree and roots. So once an order is issued, once the roots are planted, it remains rooted in that state until all components of the roots have left the state, children and parents. So that's federal law after 1980. Now we have a mismatch between the UCCJA, our Uniform Act, and the federal law adopted in 1980. So the UCCJEA republished its Uniform Act in 1997 to catch up and reconcile. It adopted the ordered prioritization of the Parental Kidnapping and Prevention Act, numbering 1, 2, 3, and 4. It adopted the Continuing Exclusive Jurisdiction Act and also full faith and credit. That should make the UCCJEA and the PKPA sound a lot just like Vanilla Ice sampling under pressure and pretending it's his own music. So what did the UCCJEA offer that was original? It offered the idea that emergency jurisdiction, when exercised, must be limited only to temporary orders. But again, this is a uniform act, so some states have adopted it, some states haven't. So all jurisdictions do have some emergency power separate from the authority to modify. So some emergency powers to step in over the child, siblings, and parents. So that would affect domestic violence, child abuse, abductions. So this podcast has introduced you to issues of child custody jurisdiction, codified currently in the Parental Kidnapping Prevention Act and various state iterations of the UCCJA or the UCCJEA.